What does it mean to be good enough? Are you good enough? Am I good enough? Do I do enough? Do I please Jesus enough? Do I please my parents enough? Am I good enough to go to college? Am I good enough to be called a good mother? Am I good enough to be called a good friend? Am I good enough to be called a good child? Am I good enough? How do I know I'm good enough? You don't have to be any of those things. You don't have to answer any of those things. You know who's enough? Jesus. Good afternoon. My name's Claudia. This is my second video in which I just felt like talking to teen girls about what it means to be a Christian and how do you align what you're hearing in church with what you're doing every day as a high schooler? Because sometimes it feels like there's a super disconnect between normal teenage life and what's being said in the church. But like, here's an example. There's two things my pastor has said recently in his sermon that I felt like as a teenager you could either take that pretty negatively, or you can take that and use it to motivate some of your decisions and choices in the next year or weeks or even just the next day. One of the things that my pastor said was, if Jesus isn't good enough for you, then you're not good enough for heaven. And like I said, you could take that to mean I'm out of here because the pastor just said I'm not going to heaven, or I'm not good enough for heaven, and I can walk away from that because I can take offense. And that's what American culture teaches us to believe, that we should take offense when someone says something that doesn't feel good. But the other way to look at it is, if Jesus isn't good enough for you, in other words, if you're not willing to understand that he's already paid the price, he's already taken all your sins, he's already made sure that your ticket to heaven is bought, purchased, paid for by his blood, then you're not good enough to be sitting next to him in eternity. And that's something to really think about, because I think there's a lot of us out there that we get wrapped up in daily life, and so eternity doesn't seem like it matters very much. Why am I concerned with where I'm going in eternity? And I get that. I totally get that. I mean, even as an adult, I often get wrapped up in why should I be concerned with eternity when today I need to be considering what we're having for dinner and what, whether or not my favorite song is coming through the Bluetooth on my car, or whatever it is that, you could get wrapped up in. I totally get it. Totally get it. And I often get wrapped up in the same type of things. But what I can't lose sight of is, on a daily basis, what I'm doing here throughout the day should only be steps on a ladder towards eternity. And eternity is me seated next to the King of Kings. And how do I account for how my day, what I was doing during the days, knowing that I was going to spend eternity with him? Is Jesus good enough for you? Do you understand that he already paid the price, that you don't have to blame yourself for making mistakes, that you don't have to think that somehow you have to work harder to get into heaven, that you have to do something better to get into heaven, that you have to, that you do anything. You have nothing to do with your ticket to heaven. You have nothing to do with it. It's Jesus. Is he good enough for you? Is he good enough for you? Because if he is, your ticket's paid for and you're welcome and you're there. I can't wait to see you there.